Ahoy, my friends. Welcome aboard the Afro Tales podcast. I'm your storyteller, Amon Mazingo. Join me as we explore the tales that grew from the people of indigenous and African descent in the Americas and the Caribbean. After, come and see me, chef, who will impart upon you a recipe for the story you have just heard. So with no further ado, let us set sail on this new age of exploration. The bird's sweet magic. A king lost his sight and couldn't find no more. Doctors came from everywhere and made promises to the king's 3 sons, and to the queen. But the king's eyes did not improve. In the kingdom, there was an old medicine woman who had made a reputation working cures where doctors had failed. Just in case, the king's family summoned her to the palace. Her instructions were these:
"You'll have the cure if you can bring home the bird's sweet magic. Rub its tails on the king's eyes. The bird is under the power of a king in the distant country. Remember this. The one who captures the bird is the one who must work the cure."
The king's 3 sons decided to give the medicine a try, and the king promised his throne to the one who could bring it back. The 3 set out the same day. The eldest left in the morning, the second eldest at noon, and the youngest toward evening. Each took a good horse and a bag of money. As the eldest son was riding out through the city gates, he saw a crowd in front of the church. And as the saying goes, the crowd's noise draws the boys. So he pulled up to see what was causing the commotion. And there was a dead man on the steps of the church. Someone had left the body without money for burial. The priest even was refusing to sing prayers for the dead because no one would come forward to pay for them. The prince said, "There's nothing in this for me," and went on. At noon, the second son came by, and still the unfortunate man had not been buried. The second son shrugged and rode away. Late in the afternoon, when the youngest pulled up, the corpse had began to give off an odor. Dogs and buzzards were trying to get a piece of it, and the crowd was shooing them away. Taking pity on the poor soul, the prince gave one of the bystanders enough money to go buy a coffin. He himself went to the priest and made a deal for the prayers. He helped open the grave and would not leave until the body had been laid to rest. After he had traveled on for a while, night overtook him in a desolate place. Ahead in the distance was a little round light the size of an orange. It kept coming closer. The prince cried out, "In God's name, who are you?" The voice answered, "I am the soul of the one you buried. Don't be afraid. Follow me, and I will lead you to the bird's sweet magic." With the light directly in front of him, the prince rode on through the dark. The next day he rested until it was dark again. Gradually, he lost his fear. He and the light would talk to each other. During the day, he would wait impatiently for night to come so that he could again be with his friend, the little light. After many weeks, traveling only at night, he came to the country of a king who was the master of the bird. Following the light, he walked past the sleeping guards and into the palace. And there, in a room paneled in gold and crystal, was the bird's sweet magic. It hung from the ceiling in a cage covered with rubies the size of coffee beans. The ceiling was paved with fresh roses. Their fragrance floated in the air, and when the birds sang, it was with the sound of flutes and violins. The prince made a stairway of chairs and tables and was just touching the cage when the whole pile crashed to the floor. The king jumped out of bed, called his guards, and ordered the prince to jail with nothing but bread and water. But then the king changed his orders. He thought, "This boy will risk anything to get the bird. Such a boy I can put to use." He freed the prince and promised to give him the bird if he would bring back a horse that the king favored over all his other horses and that had been stolen by a certain giant. So said, so done. When night came, the little round light guided the prince to the pasture where the giant was guarding the horse. It was black as satin, with white shanks and a star on his forehead. On its shoulder was a knob, and the little light said to the prince, "When you turn the knob, you will see what you see." Well, then, the prince climbed into the tree where the horse was tied. He reached down and began to loosen the rope. The horse, who could speak like a human, shouted, "Master, they're stealing me." The giant, who had been napping, woke up but could see no one and went back to sleep. The tree where the prince was hiding was a mango tree, and a very leafy one. Again, the prince reached for the rope. The horse cried out, and the giant looked around and saw only the tree. This time, he spoke sharply to the horse and threatened to break its bones if it kept waking him. The horse knew better than to test the giant's patience. When the prince reached down once more and untied the rope, the horse kept still. The prince mounted the horse, turned the knob, and rode into the sky. When they were over the king's palace, the prince twisted the knob in the opposite direction and landed smoothly just at the palace door. The king was beside himself with joy, but he was not yet ready to give up the bird. The prince would now have to rescue the king's daughter, who had been kidnapped by none other than the same giant who had stolen the horse. Unsure, the prince conferred with the little round light. The light assured him that the task was possible. When night came, the prince mounted the black horse once again and set off for the giant's palace, arriving at the supper hour. The giant's dining room was on the second floor. The little light whispered to the prince that he would have to climb a vine to the second-story window. The vine held fast to the palace wall, as the light had promised, and when the prince looked in through the window, he could see that the giant was just finishing his bottle of wine. The prince waited until the giant's head had dropped to the table. Then he tossed a pebble at the princess. She looked up and saw her chance to escape, then ran to the window and climbed down the vine with the prince. As she could see, he was well put together and good-looking. His thoughts of her were the same. The fact is, they liked each other very much. But when they got back to the king, they found he had changed his mind once again. The bird must not be taken away. The prince could choose anything else he wanted. With the voice of the little light whispering in his ear, the prince asked permission to ride the black horse 3 times around the palace, with the princess mounted in front of him and the bird in its cage held in his hand. The favor was granted, and to make sure the prince would not escape, the suspicious king set soldiers to guard every exit around the rim of the plaza. The king had no inkling that the prince knew the secret of the little knob. After circling the palace for the third time, the prince suddenly turned the knob and rose into the sky. The prince flew home to his own country. When he got to the boundaries of his father's realm, he twisted the knob again and came to Earth. The first town he entered turned out to be where his brothers were staying. After weeks of partying, they had spent all their money and were only waiting until they could think of an explanation to take to their father. The sight of their brother bringing home not only the bird's sweet magic, but a beautiful princess and a wonder horse filled them with jealousy. But they took hold of their senses and pleasantly invited him to dine with them at the inn. In his innocence, the young prince accepted their offer. As they all sat at the table, the two older brothers slipped a narcotic into their young brother's glass and the princess's glass too. And when both had lost consciousness, they dragged their younger brother to the top of a high cliff and dropped him over the edge. When the princess woke up, they told her the prince had gone off partying to another town and had abandoned her. In triumph, they came home to the king and queen, who rejoiced to see them. No one seemed to know where the youngest son had gone, and the distraught princess was presented to their majesties as a mad woman. The two brothers were ready to divide the kingdom between themselves, but when they rubbed the bird's tails on the king's eyes, it had no effect. The king was as blind as he'd been before. Yes, at that moment, help was on the way. God's wish was for the prince to live, and he gave to the little round light the power to save him. So, when the prince was dropped off the cliff, a branch caught him by the jacket. Not long after that, some mule drivers passed by, heard his cries, and lifted him to safety. When he told them who he was, they carried him directly to his father's palace. No sooner had he arrived than the princess, who had been overcome by grief, regained her composure, and the bird's sweet magic filled the air with its music of flutes and violins. The prince explained everything to his parents. The mule drivers verified his story, and finally, he touched the bird's tail to the king's face, and the king's eyesight returned. Now everyone knew that the older brothers had lied, but the youngest brother, who was one of God's own children, would not permit his brothers to be punished. Instead, he embraced them and gave them their share of the kingdom. When he married the princess, she hung the bird's cage in her window, where she could hear its music every day. When the little round light saw that his friend was safe, he came to him to say his last few words. I finished now. I have shown you my gratitude. The prince was unwilling to separate from his true friend. Then the voice came to him one more time. Farewell until we meet again in the next life. And I went in one end and came out the other, so you, my friends, could tell me another. The end. Wow, that was a great story, an interesting story coming from the book Latin American Folktales, Stories of Hispanic and Indian Traditions by John Bierhorst. I said John Bierhorst. I don't know if, Anyway, that story instantaneously reminded me of Prince Simpleton and what was going on in the Prince Simpleton story. If you don't, the link is in the show notes. Go down, listen to that story, right? There'll be a couple other ones too, but these two stories kind of match up with that. The Deus de Machina, let's address it. God comes in at the end and says, and was like, hey, nope, you're not killing my boy. I'm gonna send a branch out to grab him. I grew up in the church. It really sounds like Jonah and the whale. It really sounds like a lot of biblical stories that I heard growing up. This is a true fairy tale. There's no names. 2 kings, a queen, 3 sons, a princess, and a giant. Fairy tale fuel, magic horse that can fly, no wings, just can fly, and a golden orb that can guide him through anything. Became a guardian angel. But yeah, I love the beginning when he helps bury that man. If you've lost anybody in life, or you know somebody that has lost somebody in life, you know how hard it can be to plan a funeral, pay for that, open a grave, close a grave, pay for the funeral director, the whole process can be very expensive. And the fact that man had nobody and the prince just said, yo, I'm here to help. The fact that all the people couldn't pull the money together, like, thank God for GoFundMe now, right? That's basically what they could have done, a GoFundMe. But they didn't do it, which is crazy. But the prince came through and he helped out. I appreciate that. I even appreciate the fact that the guy came back as a spirit to help the prince. Like, yo, you helped me, I helped you. You know what I'm saying? I love that fact. I do not like the second king. I do not like the fact that he had the bird in a room doing nothing with it. This bird has magical powers and you just got it caged up in a room. Sounds like a real messed up king to me. I do not like the fact that the prince sent this man on 2 journeys to this giant. Like, why didn't you tell the prince, like, yo, go get my horse and get my daughter while you there? And, you know what I mean? We can see what's up after you get back. He just like, yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll get my horse. I love it. I love my horse. Oh, you know what? Hey, you know what? Go get my daughter, too. Same giant got my daughter. Like, go get her, too. Like, bro, what is you doing? How does this giant have your horse and your daughter? Like, what kind of king are you? Why haven't you gotten these things and got your daughter yourself? Or sent one of your guys to go get them? That's crazy to me. That is crazy. I do not understand that at all. But it's a fairy tale. And sometimes in some of these Central American stories, these stories come from, I believe, is partially indigenous and partially religious. Like, you'll see in a lot of the stories that come from these regions, like, it'll be themed with a Catholic theme to them because, the church and, trying to use, basically it's like a parable out of the Bible. This story, if you put in the Bible and was like, yeah, this happened, I mean, people would probably believe it, except for the flying horse thing. But, they would probably believe that, God sent something down to help a man, retrieve a horse and a king's daughter, you know what I'm saying, like that. It sounds believable and in a religious aspect. So I thought that was interesting. I don't like Deus Ex Machina type things happening in stories. And that's what the ending is like, yo, really the brothers should have won out. They did what they were supposed to do. And God comes in. That is a Deus Ex Machina situation. The whole last part of it is Deus Ex Machina. But it's a fairy tale. So, it happens. Right? Anyway, thank you for coming along this journey. If you want to support us in getting more books, please go to Patreon and donate. You can do a one-time donation, or you could be on the Patreon team. Or I think you can go to the website, AfroTalesCast.com, and I think you can donate there. I need more books, and these books are not getting cheaper. So anyway, thank you anyway. I will always do this for free, and I will always appreciate you listening to me do this. All right? Now, go see Chef. He has a wonderful Costa Rican recipe for you. And until next time, my friends, as always, have a blessed day. Welcome, my friends, to the Galley. I am your chef, and today we have a wonderful recipe inspired by the story you've just heard. Today, we'll be creating Piononos. Now, what will we need for this interestingly delicious recipe? 3 sweet plantains, right? 1 cup young white cheese, grated. 1/4 cup flour. 1 tablespoon butter. 1 tablespoon sugar cane syrup or maple syrup. 1 teaspoon vanilla. 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/8 teaspoon of cloves. 1 cup of fried beans and vegetable oil. Now, how do we put this together? Easy. Cut the plantains in half and place them in a pot of water. Don't remove skin. Cook until soft, about 15 minutes should do. Drain well. Remove the skin and mash the plantains. Add all the rest of the ingredients, except the beans and vegetable oil, and mix them well. Incorporate working with your hands. Take 2 tablespoons of the puree and make into a tortilla. Add 1 tablespoon of the refried beans and roll into a ball. When you are done making the balls, heat up the oil and fry until golden brown, about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. Set aside on a paper towel and serve them while hot. If baking, you can bake them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. And that is it, my friends. Now, go make this recipe yours. And until I have another wonderful recipe for you, remember the hard work of the sun. And as always, my friends, enjoy. Thank you, my friends, for coming on this voyage. Thanks to Art by Chalet for the logo, episode, and shirt designs. You can get t-shirts and other items on tpublic.com. You can contact me on all socials at AfroTalesCast. That's AfroTales Cast. And email me at AfroTalesCast@gmail.com. You may also become a benefactor by simply sharing with any and everyone, giving a thumbs up, a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice, or simply donating on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. That's KO-FI.com. So until we meet again, may your winds be fair and your seas follow.